paradrama tales.
I never cheated on you, he insisted, yet I just uncovered 9 months of betrayal. 2 days later, I packed our life into boxes, left the ring on the dresser, and blocked him. How do you choose yourself? Over the person you believed was your forever for 5 years. I believed Jose and I were building a life as solid as granite. How could we not be? We met in college, stayed up late, dreaming of the future, and weathered every storm together from my first job, offered to his promotion at a startup. Our engagement felt like the natural next step. 6 months spent picking out a ring, mapping out wedding venues, and talking excitedly about the family we would create. I imagined Sunday mornings teaching our children to ride bikes in the cul-de-sac, bedtime stories tucked under a nursery mobile we'd assembled side by side, and anniversary dinners where we toasted to decades of shared laughter and unwavering loyalty. In every photo album, our smiles gleamed with the promise of forever. But beneath those happy snapshots lay the unspoken assumption that loyalty was a given in our relationship, that the vows we were about to exchange were mere formalities, confirmation of a bond already forged. I never questioned it, because trust is what we teach each other through consistency, through small acts of kindness that add up over time. I trusted the way he held my hand during long drives, how he sent me a midday text just to say I love you, and how we fell asleep each night, whispering plans for the next morning. The ring on my finger felt like an anchor, holding me steady through life's uncertainties. I didn't see the cracks forming because I convinced myself that a 5-year history of love and 6 months of promise could withstand anything. When we decorated our first home together, painting walls in soft pastels and choosing furniture that reflected both our tastes, I believed those choices were permanent. I thought our hearts were aligned, beating in unison toward the same dream. Every we in our conversations felt like a guarantee. In retrospect, the innocence of that illusion is almost tragic. I assumed forever arrived when I said yes, never imagining that 9 months of deception had already taken root behind my back. The confidence I had in our shared future blinded me to the reality that loyalty isn't automatic. It must be upheld every day through honesty and respect. And so, as I stood there, ring still gleaming on my finger, but feeling suddenly foreign, I realized that the perfect illusion of our engagement had masked a betrayal I never saw coming. The foundation I trusted, built over half a decade, had been shaking beneath me all along. I was folding laundry on a quiet Sunday afternoon when I remembered I'd left my purse on the counter, and inside it, Jose's phone, the one he'd absent-mindedly handed me earlier, so I could look up his next work flight. I'd typed in SFO to JFK and returned it without a second thought. But now, curiosity flickered. He'd been distant all week, disappearing into calls and text threads that made him tense up whenever I peeked over his shoulder. I pressed recents and hesitated. Then my thumb swiped right, revealing a screen full of deleted messages. My heart hammered. I tapped recover out of instinct more than hope, and there it was. A thread labeled L, full of affectionate good mornings, and inside jokes I'd never heard. The timestamp stretched back 9 months, overlapping the entire period we'd planned our wedding. I felt dizzy, as though my own home had shifted beneath me. Each message read like a dagger. Can't wait to see you later. Missing you more every day. Wish you were here right now. I scrolled faster, eyes stinging, stomach twisting into knots. I closed the app and opened our shared calendar, empty on the nights those messages pinged through. The contrast between our date night dinner at 7 entries and his secret rendezvous invitations hit me like a sucker punch. Betrayal isn't loud. It sneaks in wearing your familiar person's face. I stood up, phone clutched like evidence, and walked to the bedroom where he sat reading a magazine. My voice cracked as I asked, "Who is L?" He looked up, alarm flashing in his eyes, but he didn't answer. Instead, he rose and took the phone from my hand. That simple act of snatching the device confirmed every fear I'd been too polite to voice. My vision blurred as I realized I wasn't imagining things. This was concrete proof of a hidden life, a secret built one text at a time. I saw her name in his contacts list, Laura, his coworker wedged between his sister and his best friend. It was the name that carved a canyon between us. I remember dropping to the edge of our bed, my breath-shallow hands trembling on the comforter. My mind raced through every unspoken moment, the nights he told me he was working late, the weekends he needed space, the way he smiled at his phone. I felt as though I'd been holding his hand through a storm I never saw brewing. In that moment, a casual scroll, just a flick of my thumb, had become a sword cutting through the veneer of our future. The illusion shattered, leaving me with raw awareness the man I loved had been living two lives, and I was only discovering the one that ended with me. In the days after that fateful scroll, I became a detective of our own past, piecing together a timeline that revealed Jose's secret romance had quietly unfolded long before our engagement. 9 months of whispered lunches in the break room, of text messages that disappeared faster than I could catch them, of stolen moments when he claimed traffic or overtime. I mapped it all against our calendar, the proposal he made with trembling hands, the ring sliding onto my finger just weeks after his first lunch date with Laura, the weekend getaway he planned for us that neatly coincided with her business conference downtown. Every shared memory suddenly felt like a cover story. I discovered they met at a company retreat last spring, their initial smiles caught on candid photos I'd once thought were innocent team shots. I learned how they traded jokes over cappuccinos at the coffee bar, their laughter mingling, while I waited at home for him to come back. She wasn't just a coworker passing files across a cubicle, she was the inspiration for his morning selfies, the reason he bookmarked florist websites under Laura's birthday. Emotional infidelity, I realized, can be sharper than any physical act. It whispered promises of connection and validation that he stopped offering me. Their secret texts read more like love letters than status updates. Can't stop thinking about you, missing your voice. I wish you were here instead of me. I pictured them huddled over a laptop screen, choosing the perfect emoji to keep the spark alive. Those messages weren't accidental. They were invitations, each one deepening a bond built outside our home. When I confronted him, his eyes darted away, and I understood that the betrayal wasn't only in the trysts, it was in the emotional intimacy he'd exchanged for my trust. I felt layers of grief peel away as I confronted the truth. The man who'd pledged his life to me had been slipping away for almost a year, his heart divided. And as I stood in the ruins of that revelation, I asked myself the hardest question. Does emotional betrayal wound more deeply than betrayal of the body? In that moment, I knew I didn't need an answer from him. I had all the proof I needed to choose myself first. When the truth finally surfaced, my world ignited in rage and grief. But beneath the fire, I found a strange clarity. In the first hour, I wanted to tear their lives apart. I imagined revealing his secret at work, forwarding every message to her husband, posting their names on social media. The fury felt righteous. After 5 years of loyalty, I'd earned vengeance. Yet, as the seconds ticked into hours, my anger began to sharpen itself into something else. I retreated to my bedroom and let the tears come one after another until my pillow was soaked. Between sobs, I scribbled furious notes in my journal, plans for revenge, fantasies of retribution, every insult I'd ever held back. Writing it down was cathartic, but with each word I sensed the futility of those schemes. Would undermining his career or hers restore my future? Would exposing them expedite the family I still dreamed of building? By the 16th hour, something shifted. My tears dried, and I sat surrounded by crumpled paper that spelled out petty triumphs I didn't want. I realized I had only so many days, months, and years to devote to my dreams, and he wasn't part of that timeline anymore. The idea of spending more energy on him, on our ruins, felt like giving him power over my life all over again. So, I made a calculated decision. I would let go. I packed the weekend's memories, photos, keepsakes, his toothbrush, without a backward glance. I left our ring on the dresser, its sparkle mocking the promises it once held. When he called desperate and panic-stricken, I ignored it. Each unanswered ring was a brick laid in the foundation of my independence. Even grief had a place, a quiet corner of my heart, reserved for the future I'd planned, because true strength meant honoring that loss without being consumed by it. That calm resolve didn't come naturally. It was born from the embers of my anger and the depth of my sorrow. In those 2 days, I learned that rage can be a guide, grief a compass. And when they point towards self-preservation, the warmest refuge isn't revenge, but forward motion. And so, I stepped into my new life with a steady pulse, determined that the next chapter wouldn't be written in his betrayal, but in my unwavering choice to keep moving. ChatGPT said, I woke the morning after packing up my life, feeling a strange lightness, as if every box I taped shut contained a shard of my shattered past, and each one I labeled toss, donate, or keep was a conscious reclaiming of space in my heart. Moving back into my childhood bedroom, surrounded by familiar posters and the scent of Mom's lavender sachets, I realized resilience isn't a grand leap, but a series of small steps. I unpacked my favorite novels, first creating a fortress of stories that reminded me I could lose myself in something beautiful beyond pain. I replanted the spider plant I'd named Hope on the windowsill, its green leaves a living testament that growth can flourish in unexpected soil. When I folded my clothes into drawers that once held prom dresses and summer t-shirts, I felt each garment whisper, "You're not defined by someone else's betrayal." That afternoon, I toured apartments scattered across town, one with sunlit windows and a creaky hardwood floor, another with a tiny balcony perfect for morning coffee. With each for rent sign I pictured the address on my new driver's license, a tangible announcement that my life was shifting direction. No longer tied to shared leases or joint Netflix profiles, I savored the idea of choosing paint colors that reflected only me, of filling rooms with plants and prints that spoke of my personality rather than our past. I set routines that honored my own rhythm, Saturday mornings spent at the farmer's market, sampling peaches and chatting with vendors about recipes. Tuesday evenings in yoga class where I learned to breathe into discomfort instead of shying away. Sunday afternoons at the library where I devoured self-help books on resilience and notebooks for jotting down dreams. I let my phone stay silent through hours of uninterrupted solitude, discovering that loneliness and peace can coexist when you invite self-reflection rather than dread it. When Jose's number surfaced on my blocked list summary, I felt no pull to unblock. It was a boundary I'd erected to protect my newfound calm. Instead of fantasizing about a call from him, I texted a friend to meet for brunch and laughed at a ridiculous story about spilled mimosas, the sound of my own giggles startling in its freedom. Reclaiming space meant not only claiming 4 new walls, but also the mental and emotional room to rediscover who I was without him. And in that wide-open field of possibility, I felt something I hadn't in months, the quiet thrill of resilience, a certainty that my next chapter would be written with intention, not by someone else's broken promises. They say no one faces heartbreak alone, but I learned that sometimes family can be the hardest company to keep, especially when their love comes wrapped in expectations. After my 2-day purge of our life together, I thought the hardest part was severing ties with him. I didn't expect Grandma's kitchen table to become a second battleground. My parents, who'd always celebrated Jose's warmth and support, sat me down with worried eyes and gentle voices, insisting I needed closure and his side of the story. My mother argued that forgiveness is a gift I'd one day regret withholding, that without hearing his confessions, I couldn't be sure the affair was real. She wanted proof, not acceptance. My father, who had helped me pack boxes and reassured me that I deserved better, quietly agreed, but worried about an explosive conversation that might destroy his own relationship with Jose if I blocked him forever. I felt torn between honoring their concern because their guidance had steered me through life's storms and protecting the fragile sanctuary I'd begun to build by silence and distance. They reminded me of the value of compassion and questioned if I was being too harsh, too quick to cut off the man I once loved. They painted scenarios of regret and loneliness, warning that unspoken words can fester into what-ifs. My mother's voice cracked when she said I raised a caring, compassionate daughter. I never thought I'd see you so unforgiving. In that moment, I realized their expectations were another form of tether, binding me to old narratives rather than letting me choose my own. Yet I also saw how their well-meaning pressure risked invalidating my pain, as though empathy for a cheater mattered more than empathy for me. So I asserted calmly but firmly that I owed no conversation to someone who had already broken every promise, that sharing my wound with him would reopen it, not heal it. I asked them to honor my boundary, no discussion, no mediation, no demands. Their silence greeted me like a breath of fresh air, the first sign that they understood I was the only authority over my own story. In that quiet, I felt the weight of expectations lift, replaced by the clarity that I didn't need anyone's approval to choose my peace, and that sometimes the kindest act we can receive is the freedom to walk away. Science tells us closure isn't a tidy conversation or a neatly tied bow. It's a process that happens inside us, shaped by our minds more than by anyone else's words. I learned this when I dove into research on breakups and found that psychologists describe closure as an act of self-reconstruction rather than external confirmation. Studies on grief and relationship loss show that the brain doesn't wait for an apology to begin healing. Instead, it forges new neural pathways through reflection, self-compassion, and the deliberate reframing of painful memories. One study even found that people who journal about their emotions for just 20 minutes a day report significantly lower distress levels within a week. That explained why my nightly pages of anger-turned empowerment felt like I was rewiring my own narrative. Neuroscience also reveals that the act of letting go releases the stress hormone cortisol, reducing the physical ache of heartbreak. When I consciously decided to focus on my future apartment tours, solo yoga sessions, and coffee dates with friends, I triggered the same reward centers in my brain that light up when we achieve personal goals. In other words, by choosing new experiences over rehashing old wounds, I was literally rerouting my brain's reward system toward independence and self-worth. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT techniques taught me that closure demands active restructuring of thought patterns, replacing "I should have known" with "I deserve respect," and swapping "what if I regret this" for "what if this is my liberation." This reframing strategy, backed by decades of CBT research, helped me interrupt negative thought loops and build resilience rather than resentment. It wasn't about erasing memories, but about integrating them as lessons, transforming pain into purpose. Finally, the psychology of forgiveness clarified why I didn't owe him a conversation. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. According to social psychologists, forgiving someone internally frees you from the emotional burden, but it doesn't require you to restore contact. That was the key distinction I needed. I could let go of bitterness without reopening the door to betrayal. Armed with these insights, I realized closure wasn't waiting for his side of the story. It was choosing practices that rewired my brain toward hope. It was the breath I took during a grounding exercise, the proud smile when I signed my new lease, and the peace that settled when I reread my compassionate journal entries. In embracing the science of closure, I transformed a chapter of hurt into a foundation for healing and discovered that true freedom comes from within. Every open house felt like stepping into a fragment of my future, and I learned quickly that choosing 4 walls and a roof is as much an act of creation as it is of escape. I started by mapping out my budget. No joint accounts to untangle meant I had to know precisely what I could afford without compromise. That clarity was liberating. I realized my financial independence wasn't a vulnerability, but a cornerstone of rebirth. My first visit was to a sunlit loft downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows, where I imagined morning light filtering through linen curtains as I brewed my own coffee and scribbled plans in a notebook titled New Beginnings. The real estate agent's smile faded into the background as I focused on the possibilities. Would my friends laugh around that kitchen island? Could I hang my mother's vintage quilt above the bed? The little details mattered more than square footage. Next, I toured a cozy cottage-style unit on a tree-lined street. Its creaky hardwood floors and small balcony overlooking a community garden whispered of slow Sunday mornings spent tending potted herbs. I climbed the narrow staircase to the lofted sleeping area and felt a rush of hope at the thought of decorating it with fairy lights and framed photographs of my travels. But I also paused to measure the practicality: the commute for my new job, the storage space for my daughter's keepsakes. Yes, I plan to be a mother one day, and the pet-friendly policy that would allow me to adopt a cat for companionship. Each consideration grounded my excitement in reality, ensuring my dream home would sustain me in both heart and habit. By the third viewing, a modern one-bedroom with a compact nook perfect for my makeshift home office, I sensed the right fit. Its neutral walls invited personalization, and the building's communal lounge promised new friendships rather than isolation. I envisioned hosting book club meetings where laughter would spill over mugs of tea, a stark contrast to the silence that once followed my heartbreak. When I negotiated the lease terms, securing a reasonable rent, a flexible move-in date, and permission to paint one accent wall, I felt that same surge of empowerment I'd first felt when I closed the chapter on my engagement. Signing the lease was more than ink on paper. It was a declaration that my story was mine to write. As I stepped into my empty new apartment carrying just a suitcase and a spider plant named Hope, I understood that rebirth isn't about erasing what came before, but building upon it. I arranged my few belongings in deliberate spots: my favorite chair by the window, a bookshelf for my journals and self-help guides, and a small altar with a framed photo of me, smiling, proof that I could and would be happy again. With each box I unpacked, I reclaimed more of myself, transforming physical space into sanctuary. In that moment, I realized my lease wasn't just a contract. It was the blueprint for the life I chose when I chose me. In the end, I discovered that the greatest act of love isn't clinging to a broken promise, but honoring the promise you make to yourself. Standing in my new living room, the late afternoon sun caught the dust motes dancing in the air, and I realized my heart was lighter than it had been in months. This apartment, once just an address on a lease, had become a sanctuary built from my own determination to heal, learn, and grow. Instead of replaying his excuses or waiting for apologies that might never come, I chose to fill these walls with laughter, intentions, and the rhythms of my own design. Every framed photo I hung, every houseplant I nurtured, and every good night's sleep I slept without fear wove a tapestry of hope and self-respect. I am not defined by the betrayal I endured, but by the courage I summoned to walk away. Now, as I close this chapter of pain and unlock the door to possibility, I invite you to join me on the next leg of our journey. If you've ever had to choose yourself over someone you loved, share your story below and remind someone in this community they aren't alone. Hit subscribe for more tales of turning turmoil into triumph, and tap the bell icon to be first to hear about our next episode on rebuilding trust and finding joy in new beginnings. Because your story and your healing deserve to be at the center of your own life.